Welcome to my channel, USA Battle Zone. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that will stay with you long after this video ends. It's not just a story about courage or loyalty. It's about a girl who carried her father's legacy in her heart, and how the world around her forgot what that meant, until it was too late. So sit back, turn up your volume, and imagine this playing out in the real world, where words can get you suspended, and silence can change everything. Her name was Emily Carter. 16 years old, quiet, brilliant, and proud, the kind of girl who wore her father's old dog tags under her hoodie, even though the school had a rule against jewelry during physical training. Her dad was a U.S. Army Ranger. He wasn't just a soldier. He was the kind of man who disappeared for months, leaving behind only letters that smelled of sand, sweat, and smoke. Emily would read those letters every night before bed, and every time she did, she felt stronger, like she was part of something bigger, something braver. But not everyone saw it that way. It started on a gray Tuesday morning. Emily was sitting in history class when Mr. Dalton, her teacher, asked everyone to share what they admired most in life. When it was Emily's turn, she stood up straight and said softly, "My dad. He's a ranger." The room went silent. Some of the kids chuckled. A few rolled their eyes. And Mr. Dalton, a man who believed soldiers caused more harm than peace, frowned. He asked, "Do you mean a park ranger, Emily?" Emily shook her head. "No, sir. U.S. Army Ranger." He sighed, the kind of sigh that carries judgment more than disappointment. He said, "Emily, this is a classroom, not a war zone. Let's talk about people who make peace, not war." She sat down, her cheeks burning, but her voice didn't tremble when she whispered, "My dad makes peace. He just fights for it first." The next day, she was called to the principal's office. Her mother was already there, tired eyes, hands folded tight. The principal, Ms. Rayner, cleared her throat. "Emily," she said, "we received some reports that you've been talking about military operations and glorifying violence." Emily blinked. "I was just talking about my dad." The principal looked away. "Given the current sensitivity of things," she said, "and the school's policy on political neutrality, we're suspending you for 3 days. Her mother gasped. Emily just stared. 3 days. For saying her father was a ranger. When they left the office, she saw the flag outside, the same one her dad saluted every morning before deployment, and she whispered, "What did I do wrong?" Her mother didn't answer. She didn't have one. That night, news traveled fast. In a small town, gossip spreads like wildfire. "Did you hear about the Carter girl? She said her dad was a killer. They suspended her, finally." The world had turned her father's honor into a crime. And yet, somewhere halfway across the world, under a burning orange sky, Sergeant Daniel Carter, Emily's father, was leading his men through the jagged edges of a mountain range. He didn't know what was happening back home, but he felt something shift. Like the air itself had gone still. 3 days later, Emily returned to school. But things had changed. Her locker had been scribbled with the word, "murderer." Her friends avoided her. Even the teachers looked uncomfortable. She stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria. Instead, she'd sit under the bleachers with her headphones on, listening to her dad's old voice memos, his laughter, his instructions, his reminders to stay brave. "Always walk tall, Em," he'd said once. "You're a ranger's daughter, and that means something." Then came the letter. A small, crumpled envelope with a government seal. Her mother opened it at the kitchen table, her hands shaking. "Daniel Carter," it read, "was critically injured during an engagement near Coast Province." Emily didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood up, walked to her room, and stared at the folded flag above her bed. The next morning, she wore her father's dog tags to school. Not under her hoodie this time, but over it, shining bright in the hallway lights. When the principal saw her, she said, "Emily, take those off. We've been through this." But Emily didn't move. She said quietly, "My dad's in the hospital. He's still fighting. You suspended me for saying I was proud. You're not taking this from me." For the first time, Ms. Rayner didn't know what to say. That afternoon, everything changed. Because that same day, halfway across the country, Daniel Carter's unit was coming home. Against all odds, the man survived. And not just him. His entire battalion made it back. They called themselves Charlie Company, 3rd Battalion, 75th Rangers. And when they found out what had happened to Emily, they decided they weren't going to let it slide. It started as a whisper online. A few soldiers posted. They suspended a ranger's daughter for saying her dad served. Within hours, it spread across veteran groups, forums, and military networks. By nightfall, the story had reached tens of thousands. And by morning, hundreds of rangers, veterans, and families had gathered outside the small-town school in full uniform, silent, respectful, but unmovable. They didn't come to threaten. They came to stand, flags in hand, boots in the dirt, eyes fixed on the building that had tried to shame one of their own. Inside, Emily didn't know what was happening, until she looked out the window. Rows upon rows of men and women in uniform, some holding photos of their children, some holding folded flags, some with tears streaming down their faces. The principal froze, teachers whispered, the students ran to the windows. And then, down the front walkway, stepped a man in crutches, bandaged, scarred, but smiling. Her father. The air left the room. Emily dropped her pencil, her hands trembling. He looked older, thinner, broken in places no one could see. But his eyes, they were the same. He walked straight to the entrance. Every ranger saluted, the sound of their boots echoing across the campus. He stepped through the doors just as Ms. Rayner came out. She stammered, "Sir, this is..." But he held up a hand. "Ma'am," he said, voice calm, "you suspended my daughter for saying I was a ranger. You called that glorifying violence. But I didn't fight for violence. I fought so she could speak the truth without fear." The hallway was silent. Even the lights seemed to hum softer. He turned to Emily, standing there, tears running freely now. And he said, "You did nothing wrong, kiddo. You made me proud." That moment broke something, and mended something else. Because suddenly, students began to clap. One by one. Then the teachers joined in. Then everyone outside. The sound was thunder, not of bombs or war, but of hearts waking up. The next day, the local news picked up the story. Then national news. Ranger's daughter suspended for pride. School faces backlash after soldiers return. And yet, Emily didn't care about headlines. She only cared about one thing, that her dad was alive, and that for once, people were listening. She started speaking at schools. Not about war, but about respect. About how families carry the weight of service even when the uniform isn't theirs. About how silence and shame can wound deeper than bullets. People began to see her not as a soldier's daughter, but as a voice. A bridge between those who serve and those who don't understand. Months passed. Her father began to heal. He still walked with a limp, still woke up at night sometimes whispering names into the dark, but he was home. And Emily, she kept wearing those dog tags. Not as rebellion, as remembrance. Her school eventually changed its policy. Now, every student who has a family member in service is allowed to wear a small pin, bracelet, or tag in their honor. It was a small change. But small things matter. Because for Emily, that wasn't just a piece of metal. It was the sound of boots on gravel. The smell of dust and freedom. The weight of love and duty, all pressed into one tiny symbol that once got her suspended. Years later, she graduated top of her class. When she took the stage, she wore her gown with her father's medal pinned to it. As she spoke, the crowd stood silent. She said, "I once got in trouble for saying my dad was a ranger. But if loving someone brave is wrong, then I'll be wrong for the rest of my life." The entire gym rose to their feet. Even Mr. Dalton, the teacher who once silenced her, wiped his eyes. After the ceremony, her dad hugged her tighter than he ever had before. "You did it, Em," he whispered. "You didn't just graduate. You carried the name." She smiled. "I learned from the best." And as they walked out together, the setting sun hit the flagpole just right, the same flag that once looked down on her suspension. Now, it waved in gold and crimson light, soft and proud. For the first time in a long time, the world felt right again. But the story didn't end there. Because some stories don't fade, they ripple. Veterans across the country began telling their kids Emily's story. Schools held assemblies to talk about the meaning of service. And one morning, a package arrived at the Carter home. No name, no return address. Inside was a patch, black background, gold lettering. It read, "For those who stand, even when the world tells them to sit." And beneath it, stitched in thread almost too fine to see, "Charlie Company remembers." Emily framed it. She hung it right above the flag in her room. Every night before bed, she'd touch the edge of it and whisper, "Good night, Dad. Good night, Charlie Company." Sometimes, her father would answer from the hallway, "Good night, Ranger's daughter." And though the world kept spinning, faster, louder, harder, their home stayed still. Peaceful, because sometimes, all it takes to change the world is one voice that refuses to break. So if you've made it this far, remember this. Words have power, respect has weight, and pride, when born from love, not hate, can move mountains. Never be ashamed of who you are, or who you love. Because there are people out there, people like Emily, people like Daniel, who carry that love like armor. Thank you for watching this story on USA Battle Zone. If this touched your heart, if it made you remember someone you love, or if it reminded you what pride really means, please, take a second to like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to remember what courage looks like. Because courage isn't only on the battlefield. Sometimes, it's in a classroom. Sometimes, it's in a daughter's quiet voice saying, "My dad is a ranger." And sometimes, that's enough to change everything.